even on my worst days. I am super powerful. They waited for December 21st for their powers, but I smile because I am already super. Already hold the key to unbridled power that some knew, some learned, and some were born with. They ask me what my powers be, and I smile like, you ain't know? Like, clearly, I am artist and writer of poetry. This be power and super enough. I build worlds from metaphor, and you walk them in wonder. I paint, print, pluck, throw, grow new and gorgeous things to be adored. I can fly, I do, in worlds and dreams I build for myself. The proof is that you believe that my language and poetry be incantation under which you thrive. I am magic and superpower, a blessing with potential yet to be realized, art and artist. I be poem and poet, an example of God's creative expression even on my worst days. I am super powerful, earth bending, but I call it pottery, spell casting, but I call it poetry, sound bending when I crank my bass amp to its max. Supernatural is my natural tendency, and only the fools ever doubt. Okay, hi y'all again. I'm back. So as you heard, I'm Sasa, I kill. And today my story begins with a man. And that man was killed in May of 2020, and his name was George Floyd. Now his death was a catalyst to my story because I, like every black person in this country, have grown up watching my people be killed on the street for no reason except they lived. But this time, this death, this killing, it struck deep. And it hurt. And honestly, I couldn't tell you why, and I don't think anyone could really tell you why, but it struck me and my family to our cores. The time it happened, I was angry, and I was sad, and I was hopeless, and I was helpless, and I just felt this deep, deep ache within me. And I didn't know what to do, and generally when I don't know what to do, I turn to the same thing, and that thing is art. So some days I paint, and some days I write, and some days I play, but that day I decided I was going to print. So I picked up my carving tool and my linoleum block, and I etched out a phrase that I knew to be true. I wrote, "A man was lynched yesterday." This is probably a good time in the story to define the word lynch. So it's to kill someone, usually of a mob, but not necessarily, usually by hanging, but not necessarily, for an alleged offense with or without legal trial. And I think the alleged word is the key here. And so under that definition, we know that George Floyd and many other people were lynched. So I wrote this phrase, and I got out all of my sadness and all of my anger and my pain that I didn't really have a place for, and I put it in my ink, and I rolled it out on my block, and I stamped it on paper, and I let it rest. A man was lynched yesterday, and I knew, and I wrote it out, and it was true, and for me that was enough. I was able to take a step back and deal with these emotions. So, I shared it on Instagram with some friends, because that's what I do. But otherwise, I was finished. I was done. It was going to rest on the page, and I was going to move on. But later that day, or maybe the next day, my aunt came into my house. And my aunt, she's like my favorite pothead, crystal guru, and also my creative sounding board. So she came to my house, and I was showing her all the things I had been printing and painting in my room. And I was just giving her a run through. And she saw these cards, or not cards at this point. She saw this paper. And she said, you should make these into postcards and have people send them to their local representatives and, just elected officials, and let them know that this phrase is true and that it's a problem. Because this phrase, I don't know if you know, but it was coined 100 years ago in the 1920s. So that was her idea, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. That's kind of a lot. I just did this for my own healing. I don't know if I want to, make this a big public thing. And she was like, okay, whatever. Do what you do. It's your art. Do your thing. And I was like, cool. Not going to do that. And that was the end of our conversation. But at some point later that day, I became taken with this idea. And sometimes when I get a really big idea or project that I want to work on, I physically start to fidget because I actually want to start working on it really, really quickly. And so I was thinking about it, and I was fidgeting, and I was like, oh my God, this can be a thing. This can be a project. This is my way to take my power back. I was feeling so helpless before, and my aunt gave me this idea and this tool to feel empowered. And so I began reaching out to everyone I knew who could help me. I reached out to my boss, my former coworker, and just to have them help solidify this idea and this project that I wanted to start on. And so I was ready to go, and I was fidgeting. And then my mother, being the good Muslim mother she is, called up the stairs, "Sasa, come pray." And I was like, okay, I'm not going to feel resentment towards this core part of my religion, so, I want to go do that. And I was still fidgeting. I was really having a hard time sitting still, but what I did was I took all of that anger that I had been feeling and all that pain and all of that sadness and then all of that excitement and all of that hope. And I took that and I just prayed that this would be a project that was able to make a difference. And I prayed and I set to work. So I spent the entire night printing, and then the next day I posted on Instagram and I said, "Y'all, I'm giving away these postcards for free. Please order them and send them to your local representatives and your elected officials and your friends and family and tell them that we have work to do." And the response I got was insane. I was not prepared for all of the support that was going to come my way. People I knew my entire life, people I hadn't spoken to in years, people I'd never met once, were promoting my project and saying, support her, do this. And I was like, donate if you want to. And I got so many donations that I didn't even have to spend out of pocket a single time over the course of this 7-month-plus long project. And I was in. I was working night and day and night again to get these postcards out because I was hand printing them. And so I would wake up at 8 a.m. because all of the excitement and the power and also the still kind of deep-rooted sadness would wake me up. I'd wake up at 8, no alarm, just my body. And I would set to work. And then around 4, I'd remember that human beings kind of have to eat. Like, that's a thing we need to stay alive. And so I would eat, and then I would work again until 10 p.m. And some days, when my siblings had nothing to do the next morning and we were all free, we would start working at 10 p.m., and we would print all night together in my tiny room that is not a print shop, and we would print until 5 a.m. And then we would pray again, and we would go back to sleep. And this whole process was amazing, and it was a whirlwind, and I spent the entire time proud and happy about what I was able to do with the support of my community, but sad that it had to be done to begin with. And I did so much learning because at that point I had no idea how to, write invoices or organize my orders or even measure the weight of a package at the post office. So I did so much learning, and it was kind of a whirlwind, but I was supported and uplifted by the people around me, namely my family and my siblings and my friends. And eventually, it was August, and the March on Washington was happening for the second time in history in D.C. So me and my sister, who's actually here tonight, and my good friend went out into D.C., and we were handing out postcards, and at that point in my project, I had expanded to making stickers and T-shirts and posters, and we were handing them out for free to people on the street. We were saying, here's this project, you don't have to give a dime, just take this, and spread the word if you can, and the power and the strength and the unity that was felt in those moments to me meant the world because we were strong. Alone, we're powerful-ish. I mean, we can do kind of things, but together we can do anything. And eventually people started noticing. So in November of 2020, I was featured on WTOP's Colors podcast, and I was given the opportunity to talk about my project and my creative endeavors and what all of this meant to me. And later that month, November of 2020, I was featured in the Washington Post magazine talking about my work and everything I had done, also in relation to my job, and what the Man Was Lynched Yesterday project had meant. And I was so happy and proud that this was a thing, but again, so sad that it had to be a thing, and that sadness is what carries through today. So eventually, in this project, we're feeling powerful, we're feeling good, we're feeling strong. And people began to share their postcards with me, the things that they were writing to their elected officials and to their friends and to anyone they could think of, their police departments. And so here's something that someone wrote. And so this friend of mine begins her postcard with Mr. Hogan, which I think is a power move because he's the governor of Maryland. His title is Governor Hogan, but she said Mr. because you're normal. You need to get your act together. She said, Mr. Hogan, I demand that you join the American people in pursuing an anti-racist position in all levels and dealings of your department. I support the use of body cameras by police officers at all times and the demilitarization of the police through their defunding and reallocation of funds to community programming. And this is the kind of stuff people were saying, and they were saying it often, and I had printed at that point over 700 postcards, and so these were out in the world and being circulated, and people were writing and reading them. All these months later, the project is still going. It's going slowly, but it's still going. And these days, I dedicate my time to not only making these postcards, but to learning who that person was who was lynched yesterday. So I've collected the names, and the collection of these names has been painful and slow and warm and loving. And it's manifested itself into many different art forms, but the main one is what I want to share with you today, which is a poem. So here we go. Emmett Till, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Shaheen Mackey, Philando Castile, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, and Sandra Bland. Rayshard Brooks, Atatiana Jefferson, Ora Taussig, Stephon Clark, Botham Jean. Alton Sterling, Michelle Cusseau, Ahmaud Arbery, Janisha Fonville, Eric Gardner, Akai Gurley, Trayvon Martin, and Tamir Rice. Unknown. Gabriela Navarez, Tanisha Anderson, and Tawan Boyd, Walter Scott, and David McAddy, Walter Wallace Jr., Andre Sean Reed. Michael Brent Charles Ramos, Manuel, Manny, Elijah, Ellis, Emantic, E.J. Fitzgerald, Bradford Jr., Charles Chop Roundtree Jr., Antoine Rose Jr. Saheed Vassell, Aaron Bailey, Charlene Siobhan Lyles and her unborn child, Dion Kay, Jordan Edwards, Chad Robertson, Deborah Danner, Alfred Olango, Terrence Crutcher, Terrence Liddell Sterling, Tony Terrell Robinson Jr., unknown. Joseph Curtis Mann, Betty Boo Jones, Quintonio LeGrier, Corey Lamar Jones, Jamar O'Neill Clark, Jeremy Bam McDowell, India Kager, Samuel Vincent DeBose, and Brendan K. Glenn, and Eric Courtney Harris, and Philip Gregory White, Maya Shawatza Hall, Megan Hockaday, Natasha McKenna, Ayana Monet, Stanley Jones, Latanya Haggerty, Jerame C. Reed, Romaine Brisbane, Dante Parker, Izelle Ford, John Crawford III, Dontre Hamilton, Victor White III, unknown, Yvette Smith, Mackenzie J. Cochran, Jordan Baker, Miriam Iris Carey, unknown, Barrington B.J. Williams, Jonathan Farrell, Sean Bell, to name a few. Thank you very much.